Lifting up our hearts to heaven, let us imitate the hierarchy of the angels. Let us
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Glory be to Jesus Christ. I have a number of things to share with you this morning, so bear with me. So, what I wanted to talk to you about will begin with a poem, and I will not read you the whole thing because I would get carried away. I love poetry very much. But T.S. Eliot wrote in his poem, The Hollow Man, or The Hollow Men, excuse me, and I believe that all of you should read it, probably a couple of times to really sort of get at what it's talking about. But he ended the poem with these two lines. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. Now, the entirety of the poem, The Hollow Men, is more or less about us in sort of reaction to death, and how, in confronting death, we, the living, recognize that we are without something. That as we cry and weep at broken stones, which is another part of the poem, that we are hollow. That those who have true eyes and now see, those who have departed, look back on us and only see us as shells. Which is quite true. Because until we recognize the kingdom of heaven, we are missing something. There is something empty in us. And so, before I go any further, I wanted to work an exercise with all of you. And so take a second, clear your minds, and think of either your favorite movie, book, play, doesn't matter. Just sort of picture that. The whole story that you have come to know and love. Now think of the highest point of that sort of piece of work. And then imagine that it was gone. So the very climax of that movie, or that book, or that play, the high point, cut it out. And then imagine how utterly disappointing it would be. Would you still love it? Would you watch it? Would it be worth anything? The answer is most of the time no. When we are left without a certain high point, when we are left without a culmination of everything that has been building up, we are left just kind of empty, expecting. We wanted more. And we hear this all the time. If you read anything from movie critics or book critics, they might very well say that. That I expected more. It was a letdown. Now, we tend to forget that our own life is very much this way. We are constantly expecting the high point. We are waiting for something great. And if it weren't to happen, we would die and just be empty. That would be it. And how boring would that be? How terrible. And how hopeless. How utterly hopeless. If any of us were to sort of recognize this trend, that there is nothing happening after we die, that there's nothing we are hoping for, all of us would just stop doing anything at all. What's the point? And you might have a lot of people, especially in a very hedonistic society, running around being like, well, the point is to enjoy what you have while you have it. Which, there's a certain merit to that. To live in the moment and to appreciate it, but only insofar as you recognize that those moments are gifts given to you by God. Not that they are devoid of any touch of God, and you should enjoy them because they are fleeting. If I were to quote another poem, we sort of get this in the lines, gather ye rosebuds while ye may. That idea that while you have the chance, enjoy some stuff. But again, without the recognition that there is something greater, that we are still awaiting the high point of not just our lives, but all life. There is hopelessness here. We have to expect something greater. Because if we do not have that, if we do not have what we are building to, then we are left sort of building nothing. Instead, we're just shuffling around in the earth. In the gospel this morning, Christ says to God the Father in heaven, "Now this is everlasting life, that they may know you, the one true God, and the one you have sent, Jesus Christ." This is what we are building to know God. And we know him through Jesus Christ. We have a relationship with both of them that we build upon, that we reach. It gives us something that we are always aiming for. St. Ignatius said, "What is death? It is the age with which our true life begins." And Elder Sophrony of Essex said that life without Christ is tasteless, sad, and forlorn. And if you take that last quote from Elder Sophrony, what is something that is tasteless, sad, and forlorn, but hollow, or meaningless? It is a shell. We have to recognize that as we live our lives, we have to constantly be in the pursuit of the fact that there is something greater waiting for us. Whether we are blessed to see the day of the second coming of Christ, or we are taken up into his heavenly kingdom to await the general resurrection with the rest of all of those who have passed before us. In either circumstance, we are awaiting something greater. We are building to something. And we all have the sort of habit in our human lives to think that we are the heroes of our own story and that everything is built around us. Everybody else is a passing character. Everything else around us only serves to benefit our sort of story as we go towards greatness. And the simple fact is that we are not the heroes of anything. We are passing characters in the heroic story of Christ. We are passing characters in the heroic story of creation being brought back to perfection. And we can do great things with our small part. But it is the most sort of heinous act of pride for us to forget that it is not us who are doing any saving at all. We are awaiting that Savior. We are awaiting the high point. And isn't that the high point of everything that has a heroic story? Is that the hero comes and does the job that he was meant to do. That in the face of great evil, suddenly it is overcome. If we were to think of just any of the millions of Marvel movies that are out there, that's the high point. Just all of them get together, and there's an evil that cannot be surmounted, and then finally, everybody comes in and beats up somebody, and they win. We feel good after that. There is an accomplishment that is done. There is a victory. And if you were to take that out, Marvel would suddenly stop making movies because they wouldn't make money anymore. Because there'd be no reason to go. It'd just be depressing movies about people with superpowers doing nothing. In our lives, we have to recognize that this is what we are looking for. We are waiting for our own death, not because we are tired of this world, or because it sucks here, or because we just want to escape. While we may appreciate, and we should appreciate, our lives here, and recognize the gift of our lives that God has given us, we should never be so attached to it that we forget that there is something greater awaiting us. And furthermore, we should never be so attached to the fact that we are important, to forget that in the second coming of Christ, He will be the only important thing. He will return to make all things new. Everything that we might know and understand now could be very well changed. But that is according to the will of God, not us. I wanted to close with a reflection written by Father Anthony Coniaris, in which he describes it as the last chapter. And he begins by saying, life is complex. Things never seem to turn out right, and many times it is like a detective story, where the plot seems very confused. One is not at all certain what the outcome will be, but in the last chapter, the detective summons all the suspects into a room, proceeds to unravel the mystery, and shows the pattern running through it, and reveals how he knew the guilty person. It is only in the light of the last chapter that the rest of the book makes sense. And we have to remember that we have received that last chapter. That in His great love, God has allowed us to read this last chapter. He's allowed us to see that we live in a world where the final victory has been won. The cross was not the end for Jesus, neither will it be the end for those who believe in Him. The risen Christ will have the last word. And the last word is, in the world you have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. The final chapter is the parousia, the second coming of Christ, the resurrection of the dead, the final judgment, and the establishment of the endless kingdom of God. If we know this in advance, what a profound difference it should make in our attitude toward suffering, toward evil, toward death, toward everyday life. We have to remember that when we are expecting something greater, in our sort of earthly bound, the world will not end with a bang, but with a whip. We will be taken, and may God do so to us mercifully. But it will not be a great event. It can just be great personally for our souls if we are ready. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Glory be to